Well, some of the
Oh, you are.
right across the street from Hadestown.
Okay, friends, okay. Is that good? Channel 7, do you feel okay about that? Okay, if you're good, I'm good. Good morning, everybody. I am Deputy County Executive Maria White, and on behalf of County Executive Poloncarz, it is my pleasure to welcome you this morning to our hybrid press conference on the true cost of childcare. I really would also like to welcome, a warm welcome to all of those who are joining us for our live stream today. We are live streaming this on the county's YouTube channel, so welcome to all of you as well. We are here today to release the findings of a study conducted by Cornell University in partnership with the Erie County Emergency Child Care Task Force and New York State Assembly members Monica Wallace and Karen McMahon. The study focuses on the true cost of childcare. And I want to talk to you today about why this study was necessary and then share with you the ask Erie County is making of New York State government. But first, it's important for me to take a brief commercial break and thank a few people. So first, I want to start by thanking Erie County DSS Commissioner Marie Cannon. Commissioner Cannon could not join us today, but she and I were named by County Executive Poloncarz as the co-chairs of the Erie County Emergency Child Care Task Force in March of 2020 when the pandemic began. And it has been my distinct pleasure to serve in this capacity alongside of the commissioner, and I really want to thank her for her leadership. It is because of the leadership of her and her team that Erie County successfully launched the virtual learning centers in the fall of 2020, which were a one-of-a-kind remote learning model established with CARES Act funding to support children and their working parents early in the pandemic. Many of you may not know this, but it is because of Commissioner Cannon's work that Erie County won a national award from the National Association of Counties for the creation of those virtual learning centers. And Commissioner Cannon has brought just as much commitment and leadership to other challenging issues in the pandemic, like housing and homelessness and employee safety and so much more. So I really want to thank Commissioner Cannon. I also want to thank the members of her staff, particularly Erie County Department of Social Services Director of Family Independence, Jackie Hall, who has joined us today, Jackie, as well as our Commissioner of Public Advocacy, Karen King, who has joined us today. At various times, both Jackie and Karen led subcommittees of the task force, and we very simply would not be here without them. I would also like to thank Erie County Chairwoman April Baskin and Legislator Lisa Shamara, who has joined us here today. Legislator Shamara has been an active member of the Emergency Child Care Task Force since its inception. And having the support of the legislature made our virtual learning centers possible, and it enabled this study, the purpose of which we are gathered here today. Of course, I also want to thank and acknowledge Assembly members Monica Wallace and Karen McMahon. They have been leading the way on child care issues in the New York State Assembly, and it was in partnership with them that the very concept of this study was born. I'd also like to thank the other members of the steering committee for the child care study. So Kim Szyminski has joined with us. She's the director of CCRN, the Child Care Resource Network, along with some of her staff. Sherry Scavone, who is the president and CEO of the Women's Foundation. Sherry has also joined with us. Kim Ladico, who is the New York Early Childhood Professional Development Institute director. She has not joined us, but she serves on our steering committee. Lou Jean Flaron and Rusty Weaver from Cornell University are on our steering committee, and we welcome them. Diane Abrams serves on our steering committee. She's the owner of Toot Toot Daycare. Vanetta Rhodes of the Western New York Child Care Action Team is on our steering committee. Jill Robbins of the YWCA, Bonnie Caldwell of CSEA, Tiffany Malone and Colleen Brecker, two child care providers that serve on our steering committee who are going to be speaking to us today and offering their comments. And finally, my assistant in the back, Karen Nakotra, who has not only served as the clerk for our committee, but who is also a friend and a confidant and a former child care provider. And why she is a former child care provider is part of why we are gathered here today. Finally, I'd also like to thank all of the child care providers, especially those who serve on the Emergency Child Care Task Force. They are the center of the task force's mission, and they have been holding it together with far too few resources for far too long. These women, and they are all women, friends, have the broadest shoulders of anyone I know. They are not only carrying the weight and well-being of our young people in their hands every single day, but it is on their shoulders that the entire workforce system is built. And our country and our economy owe them a debt of gratitude. So, returning from commercial break now, why is it necessary to conduct a study on the true cost of childcare here in Erie County? Two reasons. First is because the market rate, oh man, new commercial break for tech issues.
Here we go. I'm just going to put it down here.
Okay.
That'll pick you up.
So, two reasons why we felt it was necessary to study the true cost of care here in Erie County. So the first reason is because the market rate, which is the rate set by the New York State Office of Children and Family Services and paid to child care providers for all the kiddos whose families are income eligible to receive a child care subsidy. And in Erie County, that's approximately 2,500-ish children, is far below the actual cost of care. So that market rate is here, but the actual cost of care is way up here. So we knew that it was far below the actual cost of care, but we didn't know how far. And it was important to study it in order to find out exactly how far below the actual cost of care it was. The second reason why it was important to study this is because we fear that this fact, this delta between the actual cost of care and the market rate, this fact is contributing to a series of falling dominoes that have had and continue to have a serious detrimental effect on the local and national economy. So these dominoes, friends, look something like this. We have extremely low wages for childcare workers, and that has contributed to a childcare worker shortage, a massive exodus of childcare workers out of the childcare system. That has in turn contributed to childcare centers closing, which means there are fewer childcare spots available to working families, which means millions of women nationwide have dropped out of the workforce. And then suddenly businesses report all over the country that there is a labor shortage and they can't hire workers. Businesses can't grow, and we have economic growth stalling. And then hard-fought gains for women suddenly start to slide back, and we have dire consequences for children. So you can see this series of dominoes. So we feared, our fear was that those dominoes would unfold as the childcare situation worsened, and we felt it was necessary to test our suspicions with this study. Many of those dominoes, including the mass exodus of childcare workers from the workforce, were in fact borne out by the study, and you will hear more about that in a presentation momentarily. I can also confirm that this issue is affecting the business community because the Buffalo Niagara Partnership, our local leader and Chamber of Commerce in Western New York, who was unable to join us today, has just rolled out their 2022 advocacy agenda, and listed among their top priorities for business is childcare, supporting and increasing affordable access for childcare to support the workforce needed for their business members. So I cannot wait for Cornell to share the findings of their study, but first it is important to hear from the childcare providers themselves. This study is grounded, as it should be, in the lived experience of childcare workers, and no two people can better articulate or personify the problem than the providers who will offer their comments today. So with that, I would like to introduce Colleen Brecker, who is the CEO of her own childcare center called Early Bird Childcare Center in Springville. Please, Colleen.
Thank you. Again, my name is Colleen Brecker from Early Bird Child Care Centers. 5 years ago, 2 grandparents came into our child care center with 3 adorable grandchildren. Their mother could no longer care for their children, which left the working grandparents scrambling for child care. With the help of subsidized child care, they were able to enroll their children, go back to work, and the children flourished. Soon after, the mother was well enough to take care of her children. We were sad to see them go, but we were happy that they were reunited with their mother. But that's not where the story ends. 1 year later, the mother came back to our center with her 3 children and a baby in tow. Soon after, the children's elementary school closed, but Early Bird didn't close. In fact, we stayed open. We continued caring for their children with the help of subsidized childcare. The mother could continue working. The children stayed in our center, which then was a virtual learning support center. I am happy to report now that today, the children are still in our care. The mother has received a supervisory role in a large department store. Even though they still receive subsidy, they are on the road to financial freedom. This story is like many stories that we have that prove the success of subsidized childcare. Unfortunately, today, the tuition that we receive through subsidized childcare is far less than we receive from our private pay tuition. This is leading us to staffing shortages. I can't pay for more staff, which then leads to waiting lists, so I can't take more students into our care. And worst of all, I'm having to decide between private pay families and subsidized families, a choice that I never used to have to make. Subsidized childcare is historically a successful program, and I know with more funding, we will share more success stories. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colleen. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Tiffany Ballone. Tiffany is the CEO of ABC Learn and Play Childcare, which is a center in the city of Buffalo.
Yes. Hi. My name is Tiffany Malone, and I'm a child care provider in Buffalo, New York. I want to first thank Erie County and Cornell University for the opportunity to speak today and to participate in the cost of care study. The current market rate is 69% of the estimated actual cost of care in New York State. 95% of the families we serve in my program are subsidized children, paid at the current market rate. Because of low subsidized payments, my program struggles to pay teachers above minimum wage, with almost all of our employees qualifying for some form of social service assistance. Most of our teachers work second jobs in order to sustain. The low wages create a workforce strain, forcing me to choose between classroom improvements and employee raises. Our program is affected because we cannot afford to purchase updated classroom furniture and materials without the help of local grants that are not always available. This can affect the quality of care we strive to offer. As providers, we have learned to be innovative, creating the best environments for our children and meeting and exceeding state regulations to provide the best care possible with what we have. I would love to experience a child care infrastructure that shifts us from surviving to thriving. If there's an increase to the market rate to 100% of the cost instead of the 69% we are currently receiving, I will be able to pay our teachers a living wage and offer a better benefits package. I could attract and retain qualified teachers, boosting the quality of care offered and reducing employee burnout. I could update my classroom environment and materials, making sure our children have access to all the resources they deserve and need. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much to Colleen and to Tiffany. We are so grateful for the work that you do to support our children and families in your care every single day, and for the critical role that you both play. And there's Diane Abram. Welcome, Diane. For the critical role that all of you play in holding up our entire workforce and our local economy. Another round of applause. I would next like to introduce Kathy Creighton. Kathy is the director of the Cornell University ILR Buffalo CoLab. ILR, of course, conducted this study, and she's going to tell you more about our study findings. Kathy.
Thank you, Maria. As Maria just said, my name is Kathy Creighton, and I'm the director of Cornell's Buffalo office, which is housed right here in this beautiful historic building. Before I just begin my remarks, I want to say that our leader through all of this has been Maria White, Deputy County Executive, and I just want to give a round of applause. In the fall of 2021, we were approached by Erie County and Maria White and the Emergency Child Care Task Force, as well as Assembly members Monica Wallace and Karen McMahon. And they asked us to research the question of what is the true cost of providing quality child care in Erie County. The purpose of the study was to ascertain whether New York State's subsidy for child care was adequate to meet the costs of providing child care. And we've been privileged to work closely with all of these great women, and as Maria said, friends, they are all women pretty much. We've been privileged to work with the child care community, and I want to thank all of them, the providers who gave their time and attention to this important issue. Our office has been researching the child care industry in Erie County since the mid-2000s. In 2006, we issued a report that found that the business sector's reliance upon high-quality child care services was necessary for workplace recruitment, for productivity and stability. These things are a duh, but this is what the study found. And now, back in 2006, we thought that was novel, and we all know, especially in the pandemic, how true that is. We also found that for each additional local or state dollar invested in child care, there was a return on investment of $1.52. So not only is child care necessary for business, it's a good investment in the community. So here we are 15 years later, and we've reached a number of findings which are of concern not just to child care workers and parents, which are terrible concern to child care workers and to parents, but to Western New York and our economy as a whole. We found that from 2019 to 2020, Erie County lost 11% of its child care workforce. Poof, 11% gone. And we found that the primary reason for this exodus was that the low wages that child care workers are paid. Now, this isn't because child care workers wanted to leave the industry. In fact, we found quite the opposite, that child care workers are passionate about the work they do. They train for it, it's a career, and they didn't want to leave. But when you're paid more money as a fast food worker than you are as a child care provider, they were forced to make these difficult decisions. We found that the average annual wages for full-time workers is just over $23,000. That's a median hourly wage of $10.38 an hour. And we found that these low-wage workers are almost all women and disproportionately people of color. In other words, this is an equity issue. Ladies and gentlemen. 2/3 of providers who accept DSS subsidies agree that existing subsidy rates, this is 2/3, do not cover their current costs of care. This means that providers who educate financially disempowered children are more likely themselves to be financially disempowered. 7 out of 10 of our survey respondents indicated they currently do not make enough money to offer the level and quality of services they want to provide. And that situation is more severe when we look at DSS subsidy recipients. Over 80% of the subsidy providers reported inadequate revenue. Child care providers overwhelmingly said that if they had sufficient funding, their number one way to spend that money would be on higher salaries and better benefits for current staff and additional staff. and then also, second, capital improvements in their facilities. Because child care providers cannot find employees, they cannot accept children. And here we go to how the Deputy County Executive so eloquently put the domino effect. Therefore, we have long wait lists for children waiting for childcare, and this means that parents who cannot find childcare can't return to work. They're forced to quit their jobs, and labor shortages is a fact that we're all quite now familiar with. So you can see the rippling effects of not having affordable, adequate childcare, which pays its workforce a wage they can live on. So here are some of the specific numbers that we reached. In this chart, you can see that our study found that self-reported childcare providers for DFPCC is childcare centers, and FEC, these are home care providers, that it costs them $12,254 per child per year to educate their children, and for home providers, that's $18,000. About the money they are getting is $7,800. You can see this huge gap, and $9,000 versus $12,000. If they were to receive 100% of the subsidy rate, and well, let me explain this. Child care providers who accept children who are receiving a state subsidy are only paid if the children are in attendance and not if they're enrolled. So that means that children who are off work because they have, or they're in quarantine, especially during the pandemic, the attendance is so low that child care providers are not being paid for the full cost of taking care of those children and educating them. And instead, they have all the same rent and food and supplies that they have to pay for, but they're not getting reimbursed for that. This last number I want to point to shows that what are the salary rates if child care workers were paid full-time $25 an hour, part-time $20 an hour, then this is what it would cost to provide child care to children in Erie County. And the gaps are set over here. So this gap shows a weekly gap, a monthly gap, and an annual gap between the subsidy rate and what it currently costs to pay for childcare. And the bottom graph shows what the gap would be if we paid workers $20 an hour for part-time work and $25 an hour for full-time work. So you can see that the gap is quite significant, and the current subsidy rates are not adequate to pay for childcare, never mind quality childcare. So I want to conclude that the results of this study are raising alarm bells. It shows quite clearly that our childcare industry is broken and the current funding models are not working, and it's obvious that greater public investment is urgently needed. Thanks.
So thank you so much, Kathy, for sharing and reflecting on the specifics in the study. At the conclusion of our press conference, the study will be live on the county's website, and I invite all of you to take a look for the full review of those details at your convenience. So with all of that said, with the lived experience of child care workers leading the way here and backed up by the data from Cornell University, what is Erie County's ask of New York State during this budget season? Our specific ask of New York State is to increase the market rate such that it pays the actual cost of care and builds in the significant raise for child care workers. Why did we settle on $20 and $25 an hour? Because child care workers are required to have educational credentials, and any other employee with those kind of credentials in other sectors of the economy would be making similar such wages. So we settled on that type of a wage rate. So we want to make the ask of New York State such that they pay for the actual cost of care plus increased wages for child care workers. To do so amounts to a $20 million additional ask in Erie County's Child Care Block Grant allocation. The current allocation is $26 million, so now we are asking for approximately $46 million in total. Just to be clear, this is how much money is needed to pay the actual cost of care with increased wages for the current number of kiddos enrolled in our subsidy program, approximately 2,200 kiddos. Naturally, if more families are eligible under state guidelines or more children are enrolled, then more money is needed. I will close by offering just two brief comments about the New York State budget and our hometown governor, friends. First, we know that childcare is undergoing a national crisis, and the dynamic that is unfolding here in Erie County is also playing out in communities all over the country. And the childcare industry is in desperate need of a complete overhaul by the federal government. Simply put, we know that New York State cannot fix this massive problem and thereby stop the cascade of dreadful dominoes that we talked about earlier. Aggressive action has to be taken at the federal level. However, increasing the market rate in this way is one simple step that New York State can take to stabilize the industry and get people back to work. My final point is that while we make this ask of New York State, I want to acknowledge that the only reason we're having this conversation right now is because Kathy Hochul is our governor. And I will share a brief personal story to reflect on that. In 2006, when I was a newly elected legislator and my now 17-year-old was just 2, Kathy Hochul and I, she was the Erie County clerk at the time, were scheduled to speak at an event. On this particular Saturday, my childcare fell through, and I had to bring my toddler with me. And when I got up to speak, my son was on my hip. But as toddlers often do, he wiggled right out of my arms and started wandering around the community center. And when I stopped mid-sentence to go after him, Kathy Hochul smiled at me, gave me a nod, and proceeded to follow my baby around for the next 10 minutes so I could perform my duties as childcare. Our governor watched my baby so I could do my job. That's what it means to have a governor who empowers women rather than harasses them, and who understands if we want to foster increased participation of women in the workforce and increased participation of women in leadership, then we need reliable childcare. I will never forget that moment. I'm so grateful to Kathy Hochul as our governor, and I am more confident than ever that this is our chance to support women, to support children, and to support our local businesses in a way that meaningfully helps us recover from this dreadful pandemic. That's all I got, friends. Thank you so much. I'll gladly take any questions.
What's the likelihood that you think you'll get this funding?
I think there is some likelihood. I feel that way because Kathy Hochul identified childcare in her State of the State address. She specifically called out increased wages for childcare workers as part of that State of the State address. She put childcare funding in her upcoming New York State budget. She proposed that just yesterday. Erie County and Department of Social Services has a meeting with NYSAC, the New York State Association of Counties, to kind of digest the budget components. So I don't have a good handle yet on to what degree the funding the governor has identified is new funding or reallocated funding or repurposed funding. So I will have a better handle on that next week, but I know it is on her radar.
And so you talk about increased wages. Is this just for certified teachers? I know a lot of daycares, childcare centers will hire people who, I wouldn't say off the street, it sounds bad, but someone without an actual formal education degree. Would this be just for those with a degree or for pretty much anybody? Because I know I've had a friend of mine, just real quick, sorry, who was applying for a job at a childcare center and couldn't take it because it wasn't enough money. You make the point about that.
Sure.
Does this apply to everybody or just those with degrees?
So it's probably not accurate to say that you can just hire someone off the street. Childcare workers have to go through significant background checks, and they do have to have credentials. Maybe I'll just invite.
a degree? I know the background check stuff, but an actual
Sure.
education and
Let me just invite some of our providers who might want to comment on the process they go through for hiring.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And what we're finding is that it used to be that we had the luxury of finding people that maybe didn't have that collegiate background or maybe weren't like book smart, but they have this wonderful gift for children. We've had people that had doctorates and went crazy with the toddler, and yet maybe someone who struggled in school or just had the patience of Job with his children. And so what we do is we take these people who have this amazing gift, and then we put them through schooling, through a CDA process, and so we try to find people who have the gift of children. We have hands-on interviews, and unfortunately, we don't have a way to assess somebody's skill level. We don't have a metric, and without that metric, a lot of these people that come in start at low wages. And but we would like the opportunity to build from within, build leadership within, and with the help of more funding, we can do that.
Thank you, Colleen.
the people you're referring to, these wage increases would apply to them as well.
Well, right, I'm hoping, yeah, thank you.
I mean, the issue here is that if the subsidy pays for the actual cost of care and the wage increases are built into that cost of care model, then childcare workers across the sector can get raises. Now, one thing that's important to note is many childcare providers do not currently accept children who take a subsidy. So they are leaning only on those private pay parents. And for the record, many of the wages that those childcare workers are earning are likewise very low. But it is our hope that if we raise the subsidy rate to the actual cost of care, then childcare providers everywhere will be able to take children who receive a subsidy and thereby eliminate some of the race and income disparities that we see in the sector entirely. Any other questions, friends? Yes, please.
There's a lot of different groups that have data, and they're going to be going to Albany and saying
Yes.
we need money, and you know, some are more worthy than others. I mean, how do you make sure that yours gets to the top of the list?
Yeah, great question. I will point out the dominoes. If you want to solve our larger workforce labor shortage problems, then we got to tackle that problem at the core. And we believe that part of the core of that problem is the faltering of the childcare industry. So, you know, Kathy Hochul in a article in September for Buffalo Business First talked about her top 3 priorities for business. What was one of the top 3 issues for business? Childcare. Not a top 3 women's issue, although it is a women's issue. Not a top 3 issue for improving care for children, although it certainly affects children and families. But a top 3 issue for business. Why? Because we know our local economy cannot grow without an adequate workforce. And we believe that tackling this problem at the core will get to exactly that issue. Other questions? Okay, friends, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for coming.